Hi everybody, welcome back. Today we're going into part 2 of our series all about learning to trust. It's a topic that is really important because it's something that is very common for survivors of narcissistic parental abuse to struggle with. But before we get into that though, I want to mention something I'm excited about. I just started a public Facebook page and then an Instagram. I'm going to put the links in the bottom for you to click on if you want to give me a follow. It's just going to be like a daily quote, either just something inspirational that I feel, particularly applies to us, or, it's a quote about narcissism or the effects it has on us, things like that I come across that are helpful. Occasionally, I might just share some thoughts about something that's happening in my life. About a week or so ago, I shared it was the 12th anniversary of my dad's death, and I just shared a little bit of reflections on our relationship and his life, things like that I'll do from time to time. So see those links in the description below, and give me a follow. I hope I see you there. Well, today we're going to look more at why trusting ourselves can be challenging. I do want to mention, if you haven't listened to last week's episode on this, I really encourage you to do that first, because today's episode is building on that. So you'll get a lot more out of it if you listen to that episode first. Last week, we talked about the more obvious things that can make us hesitate to trust ourselves. We trusted and formed friendships or romantic relationships with people who were so unhealthy. It was inevitable that they were going to hurt us. And we pursued those relationships anyway. But it's not only our failures of the past in our adult relationships. Our distrust in ourselves began much earlier than that. So let's look at what happened even before all of that. When we're kids, we're programmed to believe our parents are healthy, that they know what's going on, that we can believe what they say. The alternative is just far too frightening. Think about it. We relied on our parents to survive. We couldn't go out and get jobs and pay a mortgage or rent and buy our own food. We needed our parents to survive. And so seeing our parent as very ill or not safe, not in touch with reality, that was just way too traumatic for us to seriously consider. And so we began blaming ourselves very early on, because it was actually easier to accept something was deeply wrong with us than it was to accept that something was deeply wrong with our mothers. And then even into adulthood, it's normal to adjust our behavior to accommodate people that we're in relationships with. And in general, both of these things are totally normal and totally safe. It's usually good for a child to trust that their parent is healthy and safe and can be believed. It's usually good for us to accommodate people we have relationships with. We're social beings. This enables us to have relationships that we need. The problem is that when a person is abusive, they take advantage of these parts of ourselves and use them for purposes they weren't meant for. So know that none of this makes you defective. There's not anything wrong with you. You were behaving like a normal human being. The problem wasn't in you. The problem was in the person who took advantage of your basic humanity. When our mothers abused us, the manipulations were pretty extreme. My mom would say something to me, and shortly afterwards, sometimes even a minute afterwards, it might be days, but sometimes it was like immediately after she said it, she would completely deny it. She'd say, I have comprehension problems, like a real big thing she would say to me is, I say one thing and you hear another. And she would say, there's something in your brain. You don't comprehend things right. And it was so confusing because I would remember her saying those things like word for word. If you follow my channel, I know you know the story, but just to illustrate the point, when I went no contact with my mom, the message that what she said to me that was the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak, she sent it to me in a text. I still have the text in my phone, and yet 4 years later, She still denies saying it to me when it's in writing. I was planning on going on a trip with our family, and she sent me a text and said, "I'd rather you not go." And when I called her out on it and how that made me feel, I had said, you saying that you don't want me to go, makes me blah, blah, blah. And she just started in, "Oh, I did not say I don't want you to go." And then she started right in on my supposed comprehension problems. And, it's not her fault that I just never feel loved by her. That's another big thing she would say. How else could somebody possibly interpret the words, "I'd rather you not go"? But she still denies it and, just tells, if you asked her today what happened, she would make up some weird story and say, "I misunderstood, I always misunderstand," and I won't give her the opportunity to explain what she actually meant. Now, of course, she won't show those text messages, I can't imagine, because anybody reading them would clearly see what happened. The gaslighting, the confabulation, that was all so persistent. Just always, "Oh, I didn't hurt you. You're just so sensitive." And like I said, you just never feel loved no matter what I do. So as a child, like we said, you naturally trust what your mother is telling you. And then you also have this normal human trait to adapt yourself to fit into a relationship. So what did we do in response to all of this? We started to lose our trust in our own perceptions, our own memories, and our own ability to even understand an event that happened. When I was a child, I was absolutely convinced that I had severe comprehension problems. My mom had me so just convinced, I was so persuaded that I did not understand things properly. I made excellent grades in school. I had very high percentile scores on the state's education testing. A few years ago, in some old papers, I just happened to come across one of my state test results. I didn't even know I had it anymore. And I was just stunned when I looked at my scores. And I don't mean I was stunned at my own intelligence. I mean, just in thinking of how stupid and dumb I felt back then. And yet, those scores, my good grades, I know I saw all of those things, and none of it was enough to overcome the effects of the gaslighting, the confabulations, the abuse of my mother. When you can't even trust your perceptions, your basic comprehension, your memories, how can you have any trust in yourself? You can't. So I didn't trust myself from a very young age, and if you have a mom like mine, you very likely didn't either. And all of the blaming every time there's a problem, you feel guilty, you feel responsible for things that were not actually your fault. And since they weren't your fault, how did we feel? We felt totally out of control. So as a child, you decide, okay, I'm going to try harder, I'm going to do better, but of course, you never achieved the success you were hoping for. We wanted to do well enough so that our mothers would begin to treat us better. You want to be treated the way that you saw her treating others all the time. And that never happened. And so you feel these false failures and blamed yourself. And the trust in yourself is broken more and more as time passes because it happens again and again and again. And all of this together leads you to determining that you're less than others. And why wouldn't you? When you're treated daily like you are less than others by your own mother, then what other conclusion are you going to draw? My mom was a hairdresser. She did other jobs too, but she did people's hair out of our home. And she befriended these elderly ladies over and over. Oh my goodness, the number of elderly ladies that were in and out of our house, and we were over at their houses. One of her closest friends was blind. She befriended people that she saw as vulnerable and in need of help. That's the only kind of relationship she could be in. And she did so much for them, so many favors for them that were just completely over the top. She chopped down a tree for one of them. She didn't even know how. She learned how to chop down trees so she could do this for this woman. And she'd do their laundry and drive them places. And not that there's anything wrong with caring for our elderly. But of course, my mom didn't actually care about these people. She just couldn't walk away from these opportunities to feel that assurance and praise that narcissists crave so much. They live for that. It's, all the people telling her, "Oh, thank you so much. You're such a great person. I can't believe you did this for me." Like, she couldn't walk away from those chances. That's what kind of keeps her going. It's like food for these people. And my sister and brother, of course, they could practically do no wrong, and she spent time with them that she didn't spend time with me. She always spoke so highly of them. She would compare me to them when she talked to me, and of course, you understand I mean, like, that I was defective in some way, and they weren't. So seeing her be so much better to my siblings and just, insult me every chance she got, seeing her show so much kindness to other people, kindness that she never showed to me. Because for me, I was shown either no kindness at all, or even when she did do something that was seemingly kind, she always attached abuse and insults to it. I don't have any memories of it being any other way, not a single time. So of course I felt less than others. Because I spent my entire childhood, my adolescence, and beyond being treated exactly like that's the case. And I'm sure you can relate. You have very similar experiences. And I just want to say, I'm not completely over that. I definitely still struggle with feelings of being less than others. It's better than it was, but it still profoundly impacts my life. And I'm doing a lot of work on that now. And as I go into some of the steps to take to deal with these feelings, I'm still doing them right now. I'm definitely not on the other side. And I do want to mention, if you need to talk about it, if just to a listening ear and somebody who gets it, you can always leave a comment. As far as I know, I answer every comment people leave on my channel. I love talking with all of you. So if you just need a listening ear from someone who's going through it too, I'm here. So yeah, all this mistreatment, all the abuse growing up, and then followed by us not making the wisest decisions in who we befriend or date. For me, I ended up in even more abusive relationships as a teenager and adult. And so, of course, trusting ourselves is challenging. Now, I know that might be difficult for some of you to process because, you see, well, I feel safe when I'm distant from others. I'm safe when it's just me. So, of course, I trust myself. But like I shared last week, if you only feel safe being distant from others, then a major issue is not only being wary of others, but in not trusting yourself to see the red flags, to make wise decisions, to successfully navigate relationships. You don't trust yourself to do those things if you won't have relationships. Because let's be honest, we know that it's not true that 100% of humanity are just evil, wicked people that will hurt us. We know that. So if you won't go and try to find the people that are good, it's because you don't trust yourself to tell the difference and know who are the baddies, who are the goodies. How do we know? You don't trust yourself to be able to do that. I understand why it's scary to go out into the world or to even think about going out into the world and trying to pursue relationships again. I know the intensity of the pain that comes when you did trust somebody, when you bonded with them, and then they just, came out of left field and practically destroyed you. I've had that happen to me multiple times. It would be perfectly natural to want to avoid experiencing that again. We've just endured so much pain that's suffocating. It can seem like the right thing to do is to take extreme measures to avoid experiencing that again. But don't let those fears, don't let that lack of trust cause you to miss out on the joy that comes with bonding with others. And if you're thinking, hey, I'm very happy just being on my own and having just myself, I don't need relationships, I'd like to share a perspective for you to think on. Take some time to look at yourself and your emotions very honestly and openly, and answer this. Is it really true that you're happy? Or is it that you feel more safe living this way? Because those are two very different emotions. Learning to identify exactly what we're feeling is actually a really important exercise for us. And just to give an example, I have been so fearful my entire life in my interactions with people, and I truly didn't know. I would describe it in ways that, looking back, I to kind of laugh at myself because it's so obvious that I was describing fear, but I really didn't know. I would say, I get this horrible, awkward feeling. I get shaky. My hands and arms get cold. My hands get numb. I stumble on my words. I have trouble speaking clearly. My chest gets cold and tight. And when my therapist first suggested that that was fear, I initially thought that was ridiculous. I was like, no, it's not fear. I'm not afraid. And she said, yes, it is. It's fear. And I had to really think about it and reflect on it. And it just hit me all at once like, oh my God, it is fear. What else could it be? The problem is we weren't allowed to have our own feelings. When we expressed our feelings of hurt or fear or embarrassment, even happiness, like they were discarded or we were gaslit or mistreated. We didn't get the opportunity to really explore and understand our feelings. And so it can be confusing. It may seem simple just talking about it, but it's not. It's not simple when you haven't had the chance to evaluate your feelings, to express them, and then get an appropriate response to them. So all of that is to say, if you either avoid relationships with others altogether, or you keep your relationships very shallow and you think you're happy living that way, really take some time to think on this. Do you actually feel happy? Or do you feel safe? And you're confusing that sense of safety with happiness. And of course, we need to feel safe to feel happy. But safety doesn't automatically bring us happy. You can feel safe and also be very sad. Safety is just one component we have to have in order to feel happy. A deep bond with other humans is something that's innately a part of what we need to truly thrive. You know, we're not bears. We're not sea turtles. Those are creatures that can live solitary lives, almost their entire lives, and be perfectly content. But that's not how we are. We're a social species, and we need to feel connected to other people. But of course, those connections need to be healthy and balanced. And a lot of us haven't had that before. And so if you only feel safe not having connections, then you're going to have to take some steps that, for a while, if you want to overcome this anyway, will make you feel very unsafe. And I know how hard that is to do. I shared quite a long time ago a story when I was in northern Maine. My son and I spent a summer there in our travel trailer. And I met a couple named John and Joy. And his wife, Joy, often was off working an hour away during their summer times. And they lived in a cabin right next to the campground we were staying in. And the cabin didn't have running water or anything, so he would run over to the bathrooms there at the campground. They didn't mind. And he walked right past our trailer when he would do that. And so we would chat from time to time. We had a lot of similar interests. He has a PhD in education and is very focused on children being able to make their own choices in their education, which is something I'm also very interested in and love reading and learning about. So we had a lot of really fascinating conversations. And kind of skipping ahead, so every Sunday I would go do laundry, and just totally by coincidence, that's when John would be there doing his laundry while his wife worked. And so we'd sit and chat while we did laundry, and then we'd go our separate ways. And I started going to the laundromat on Mondays. And when that came to light in one of my therapy sessions, she asked why that was. And to be honest, I hadn't even really thought that deeply about it. So when I made myself think about it, I said, I think I'm too scared to go talk to him. I feel like I'm bothering him. I just don't want to feel that, we get to know each other more and he doesn't like me And we talked more about that. And she said, has he given you any indications that you bother him? And I thought about it. Like, he came by our trailer fairly frequently. I would say once or twice a week. He knew there was a big fair in the area he'd encouraged us to go to. And he was off somewhere and found a flyer about it with information and came by and dropped it off for me. Like, why would he do that and then have the subsequent chat that followed if he didn't want to be anywhere around me? And she helped me see that these fears weren't really matching what was going on in this relationship. And so, after a few different sessions of going into this, my assignment was to go to the laundromat that Sunday. And we were actually leaving the next day to go somewhere else because the season was ending. And I'll tell you, just to drive somewhere and do laundry while somebody's sitting across a table from me, something that I would have thought was so simple, I was absolutely paralyzed in fear. I was doing like deep breathing exercises, and I wasn't even sure if I could do it. I think it was the first time that I'd really faced that fear. These fears had been driving me to like ghost people or to withdraw from people, and I didn't even really realize that was happening. I was just sort of doing what we're talking about, finding that place of safety. I would start to feel unsafe, and so I would shift and alter my behavior to feel safe again. So climbing out of that comfort zone, pushing through that fear was, like I said, it was absolutely paralyzing. And so we get there, my son and I, we get out of our truck. I walk into the laundromat just, like, how am I even going to get through this? And he wasn't there. I couldn't believe it after all that. So I started my laundry. I looked at my son and said, why don't we go across the street for some pancakes? There was this restaurant there that was only open on the weekends. They had the most amazing pancakes I'd ever had anywhere in the world. So we went there and got our pancakes. While we were waiting for our food, and we were seated right by the door to the restaurant. It was a pretty small restaurant. And all of a sudden, John walked in the door, and he looked over and saw me, went, "Hey!" And it was my instinct right away to say hi, to greet him, and then to shift my body so that I was turned away from him in that booth. And if I hadn't been going to therapy at the time, that is what I would have done. It was being more aware of my behavior. I stopped myself and was like, no, don't do that. Invite him to join us for breakfast. And, I don't know if I was hiding my fears well or not, but I did. I invited him to sit down. I was completely panicked. He accepted my invitation. He ordered his food. And later in the conversation, he told me that he'd had something come up. He was running behind this morning. He knew we were leaving the next day. So he hurried to the laundromat and saw that I wasn't there. He went back to the campground out of town to see if we were there. We weren't. And then he was so upset because he wanted to see me before we left. And so then he realized, you know what? They like to go get pancakes at the breakfast restaurant. He drove all the way back into town, and that's why he came in the door. He was looking for me. And I just realized all of a sudden, like, oh my God, he would have done all that to find me. And I really would have hurt his feelings. I would have just said hello and then literally turned my back on him. And I wondered how many other people I've done that to in the past. And pushing through those fears, we exchanged emails. We've kept in touch. He had some exciting news about his wife and stuff that he shared with me. Like, he's a good friend. I'm so glad I was in therapy, and I'm so glad this was all just brought, like all these subconscious things I was doing I wasn't aware of, that they were brought to my conscious awareness so I could think through them and evaluate them, and then when necessary, make different decisions. It's a terrifying road at first, and for quite a while, but it's down that terrifying road that you'll eventually find not just safety, but happiness, joy, and peace. And even though you'll lose that sense of safety for a while, you'll get it back again. You can have all of the things. You really can. It takes time, and it takes hard work. It's not easy. And remember, the first step down that road isn't believing that others are trustworthy, but that you yourself are trustworthy, that you can trust yourself to see the signs and to successfully navigate that relationship, or to determine, is this a person I should pursue a relationship with, a friendship, or is it someone I shouldn't? So how do we do that? How do we get to that point where we can have that trust in ourselves? And the first step of that process is to get more in touch with yourself and your inner wisdom. And you may say, look at my history. I don't have any inner wisdom when it comes to relationships. I mean, I assume you listened to the episode from last week, and I shared about my ex-boyfriend, and that's just one of several stories of friendships and people I've known over the years that were horrible people. And so I would be one of those people in that position to say, look, I don't even have any inner wisdom on that, so I'm just not going to do the friendship thing. I'm just going to be by myself. But that's not true. That inner wisdom, it's just been silenced for a long time by the manipulations of the abuse you've suffered, from the gaslighting, the confabulations, and all that. It's just been silenced, but it's still there. I mean, for one, as I've already mentioned, getting to know our own emotions and understanding what we're feeling and why, that's something that doesn't come naturally to us. It doesn't come easy, but it's a huge part of this step. It's just sitting down, identifying the emotion you're feeling correctly, first of all. And then you need to determine whether that feeling is justified by what you're experiencing in that moment. And, I had a hard time coming up with the right word there, because your feelings are valid and they are justified because you've been abused. So that's not what I mean. What I mean by that is this: you need to determine, do I feel this way more because of the response to the abuse I've had? Or is it really purely from this situation? So when I went to go to the laundromat with John, I'm having this paralyzing fear. And so I need to determine, okay, is this because of the effects of abuse that I'm feeling so fearful? Or has John actually treated me in ways that would warrant this level of fear? And the answer to that was, no, he hadn't. This was from the abuse. So it's an understandable fear, but it doesn't match the situation I was in. But then when I think of my relationship with my ex-boyfriend that I talked about last week, I had many moments that showed me he was not a good person and I should walk away, but I ignored them. I shut them down. I never even gave them real serious thought. I pretended like they weren't happening. Or even when I couldn't do that, I would kind of explain it away as not a big deal. And the reason for that is because when he was treating me well here and there, I just wanted that so badly. I wanted those good feelings, the warmth that I got from those experiences with him. I would use that to cover the bad experiences. But I'm wiser now. I'm more in tune with myself. I'm more in touch with myself. I spend more time evaluating my feelings, like we just said, and determining whether they match the situation. So even when a person is making me feel good, so we're not even talking about fear or things like that, like good, warm feelings, I still do the same process. What am I feeling right now? I'm feeling really cared for. This makes me feel warm and happy. Now, does that feeling match my situation? And of course, in regards to my ex-boyfriend, the answer to that was definitely no. That was because of the abuse. I just so longed for that love and that acceptance and care that I really almost never got to feel anywhere, that if anyone gave me that, I was willing to overlook all these signs that showed this person did not love me, that he did not care about me, and he didn't love me, and he didn't care about me. But I just so wanted those manipulative experiences I had with him where I did feel loved and did feel cared about to be real, that I ignored everything that told me that wasn't true, that he didn't have those feelings towards me. And that's why when he broke up with me in a really horrible way that he did it, and just the lack of care at all about how this affected me, there's no chance that this person ever had any care for me at all to treat me that way. But now I'm in a different position now, and I've had a lot of practice at consciously thinking about my feelings. And then, like I said, determining whether they really match the situation or not. And this can be difficult to do in the beginning, but it does get easier. I've had a number of times when I'm in a situation and I start to feel very fearful of not being liked, of being rejected, or worrying that I'm bothering the person that I'm with. And now I talk myself through those experiences. And just as an example, a little over a year ago, I went on a trip with my brother and his wife to Colorado, and we had quite a bit of driving to do. We were going to Rocky Mountain National Park. That was a bit far from our Airbnb. And so we had all this driving to do, and because of that, we were together for a few days. There were periods of time where we were driving down the road and just not talking. And I got this really paranoid feeling, like they were so bored and they hated every moment with me. They wished they'd never even gone on the trip. And I had to identify that feeling. I was fearful. I was fearful that they were sitting there wishing they hadn't even come on the trip. And then I had to talk myself through that. Does that match the situation? And no, it didn't. They didn't expect me to act like I'm on a stage and have to entertain them every moment, or they'd hate being with me. I thought about the fact that periods of quiet when you're on a trip with people for a few days can actually be nice and relaxing as we just sit and just be with one another. And I had to tell myself that. I had to, kind of meditate on it for several minutes, just that it's okay, it's good to just be with one another in silence. And that can be enjoyable for everyone too. They're not upset that they came, they're not bored, they're not looking to me for anything. We're just enjoying being with one another quietly. But now that I understand that, I can do the work to improve and to make progress and heal over time. And I still have a little ways to go, but I'm getting there. Because of course it's not as simple as, I see I feel this way now, and it's not a match to what's happening right now, and now the feeling just goes away. No, these are, deeply implanted in us, deeply ingrained in us from all of the abuse. But as we identify those feelings that are not a match, and we disallow them from determining our behavior, and we push through them, which is really like going against everything we feel like doing, we get better and better at making these evaluations, and our behavior changes. We ourselves change. Trust that doing these steps will work, that you'll be okay. Believe that you can trust yourself, that you can make growth, and you may have totally different areas that you need to grow in your social skills and your relationships, but wherever those deficits are that are there because of your history of abuse, just have the trust that you're going to be able to do this work of healing and succeed. And in the meantime, be kind to yourself. Whatever that means for you. It's going to be different for every person. Take a bubble bath, make your favorite meal, go for a walk outside, whatever's your thing. Do it, and while you're doing it, perceive it as a kindness to yourself that you deserve. Maybe you don't even fully know what your thing is, and that's okay. Try different things and see what really resonates with you. Like about a year ago, I took a pottery class and I loved it. It was so fun. And I was just doing something for myself. I viewed it as a gift to myself, and that felt good. Reconnect with yourself. We weren't allowed to do that when we were growing up, but now we can. So spend time just being good to yourself, and make sure that as you're doing it, you see it as something you deserve, not something that you're just doing to hide pain. Take small steps. If you have relationships that are more shallow, just practice slowly deepening the bond. And it's okay to take it slowly. That's actually normal. That's one thing to do to protect yourself from abusive people. Abusive people, emotionally immature people, unhealthy people, they tend to want to move very fast in relationships. So, if you're pulling back and wanting to take things more slow, a narcissist or, just somebody with similar issues, they're going to move on to someone else because they're not going to want to wait around for you. or they're going to let their true colors show. They're going to try to guilt you or manipulate you into moving faster than you want, or they might even get enraged over it. And there's your sign. See the red flag and move on, because healthy people don't act that way. My ex-boyfriend that I was just talking about, he moved extremely fast in our relationship, and I took it as he just was really attracted to me. He just loved me right away. He was so in love with me right off the bat, and that's not what was going on. He couldn't handle taking things slow and patiently and waiting to see where the relationship went. He needed to control that. He needed to dominate that. And remember, I'm not just talking about dating, though. This whole episode is also about pursuing friendships, either starting new ones or deepening the friendships you have. Just take it slow, little by little. That way it's in bite-sized pieces that you can manage. And that's also just the normal way that relationships should go anyway. So cultivate non-abusive relationships. A better way of saying that is to find your tribe. We've had to miss out on having a real family. And yeah, that completely sucks. And no, a tribe is not the same thing as having a family. It's not, and we shouldn't pretend like it is. But it's still something really, really good. Don't miss out on having a tribe, on something really, really good over something else that you can't have. The last advice I'd give is to have a therapist as you go through this process. That can be so helpful. Oh, it was so helpful to me. A therapist, that can be a person that you can talk to about these steps, that you can talk about your feelings, evaluate your feelings, and talk about the person's behavior, get their opinion. A therapist can offer you some really valuable insight. And I totally understand. I say this completely understanding. Therapy is not accessible for everyone for financial reasons, or, some of you have shared that you've tried to find someone who's trained in narcissistic parental abuse, who understands its impacts, and you just can't find someone. But if that's something you do have access to, I really urge you to take advantage of that resource. The more you do what I've shared here, the better you're going to get at it. And in time, you're going to feel yourself developing some confidence, some trust in yourself. You're going to start to really feel like you can do it. That's kind of the stage I'm at right now. I'm definitely not there. I still have a lot to work on. But I would say in the last 6 months or so, I've really been having this feeling of like, I've made some progress, and I really believe that I can do this, and that I am going to get there. I don't really doubt that so much anymore. Just take those first steps, and the small steps. I know that those small steps can feel like climbing a mountain, but you can do it. And just keep in mind, this entire process takes a lot of patience. I remember like a year after I recognized some things I needed to work on. And I looked back and I was so frustrated because I had just thought that when I recognized it, I thought, a year from now, I'll have made a lot of progress. And then I could see that I really hadn't made near that much progress. And I was really frustrated with myself. But the second year, I really grew in those areas by leaps and bounds, and it's still coming along. So just be patient to yourself, be kind to yourself, give yourself the time you need. That's really why through all of this, it's so important to show yourself that kindness and to be intentional about viewing it as something you deserve, because you do. And I also just want to mention this, we're vulnerable, especially before we take these steps to being in abusive relationships. So I just want to add, if you are in an abusive relationship right now, please seek help. In the United States anyway, the National Domestic Violence Hotline is 1-800-799-7233. I'm going to leave that number in the description below. If you're in the United States, if you need help because you're in an abusive relationship, please call that number and ask for help. And just a reminder, in that description, you can find the link to my Facebook and my Instagram. Give me a follow if that's of interest to you. I really hope to see you there. I'll see you next week. And please remember, to all my fellow survivors, you are worthy, you are valuable, and you are beautiful, whether your mom sees that or not.